Mother's Day is supposed to be the one Sunday in the year when the noise quiets down. When the president says something warm and generic about the mothers of America, the country nods along and the news cycle takes a breath. Instead, on May 10th, 2026, the White House social media accounts posted AI-generated images of the reflecting pool glowing in eerie blue. They posted Iran footage from early January with no explanation for why footage from 4 months ago was being served up fresh. They posted clips of Israel's foreign minister offering praise. And then the president sat for an interview with a far-right media outlet where he discussed Fort Knox gold, baby vaccine vats, ending 8 wars, and the greatest economy in American history. Not one Mother's Day message. Not one. What you got instead was a window into exactly how this administration operates when it thinks nobody is watching too closely. And what that window showed, when you set it next to the verified financial record, the actual geopolitical reporting and the economic data, was a gap between the performance and the reality that has grown wide enough to see from a considerable distance. That is what this video is about. Start with Iran, because Iran is where performance and the reality diverge most dangerously. The public narrative coming out of the White House has been consistent and unambiguous. Total victory. Overwhelming force. 159 Iranian ships at the bottom of the sea. Air Force wiped out. Leadership eliminated. A military conflict, not a war. Because calling a war would imply it was difficult. And Trump has been explicit that was pretty easy. He has claimed to have ended 8 to 10 wars and suggested a Nobel Peace Prize would be the appropriate recognition for his efforts. AP's reporting on May 10th described something considerably more complicated than that. Iran had responded to a U.S. ceasefire proposal through Pakistani intermediaries, but tensions in the Gulf remained extremely high. Drone incidents were still affecting regional countries. Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz was still under active stress. The fundamental questions of Iran's nuclear posture, maritime access, and the terms of any permanent settlement remained unresolved. ABC's live coverage described the conflict as ongoing and noted that negotiations had not produced a clean final agreement. That is not a victory lap. That is a dangerous holding pattern dressed in victory lap language. The mediation dimension makes the contradiction even more explicit. The public posture is overwhelming military force. The private behavior is back-channel negotiation through multiple layers of intermediaries. Axios reported that Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and the Emir Qatar were conducting quiet talks in Miami. Pakistan has been playing a major role in shuttling communications. Regional actors are actively working to prevent the situation from re-escalating. If the military operation had genuinely produced a clean resolution being described in rallies and social media posts, none of those conversations would be necessary. The fact that they are happening tells you what the administration actually believes about where things stand, which is not where the public messaging says they stand. The Iranian side's public communications on the same day reinforced this gap directly. Iran's parliamentary security spokesperson declared that restraint was over and any aggression against Iranian vessels would be met with heavy and decisive response against American vessels and bases. The Iranian president, who is a world-renowned cardiac surgeon as well as a head of state, wrote publicly that dialogue does not mean surrender and that the goal of any negotiation is to defend Iranian national interests with resolute strength. The Iranian army told their state news agency that any future attack will be met with new equipment, new methods of warfare, and new arenas they have not yet entered. The reference to new arenas in that statement has drawn significant analytical attention. The undersea communications cables running through the Strait of Hormuz represent one such arena. Severing those cables would affect data centers and internet infrastructure across the Middle East and into the broader global network in ways that would be extremely difficult to reverse quickly. The Iranian side has not made this explicit, but the language they have chosen is designed to be understood, and it is being understood. Meanwhile, Energy Secretary Chris Wright sat down with Kristen Welker and explained that the United States had suspended Project Freedom, its plan to militarily open the strait, because Iran had asked to keep talking. He explained the delay in Iran's response to American proposals by suggesting the Iranian government was confused about who its own leadership was. This explanation does not hold up to basic scrutiny. Iran's leadership structure is decentralized and deliberately layered, but it is not confused. The Ayatollah is alive and directing policy. The foreign minister is known and active. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard coordinates its operations in a deliberate and organized manner. What the Energy Secretary described as Iranian leadership confusion is better understood as Iranian strategic patience. They are making the United States wait, because making the United States wait is itself a negotiating tool. Describing it as confusion is either a misunderstanding or a misrepresentation, and neither reflects well on the analytical capacity of the people presenting it. The economic messaging delivered by the administration on the same Sunday represents the second major area where the public performance and the verifiable record diverge significantly. Kevin Hassett, the National Economic Advisor, told a morning show audience that the United States could be looking at GDP growth north of 4, north of 5, north of even 6%. His reasoning drew on capital spending growth, productivity gains from AI, and the onshoring activity he attributed to Trump's tax and tariff policies. He acknowledged the official first quarter 2026 figure of 2%, but argued this was artificially depressed by the importation of capital goods for factory construction, with the real growth arriving once those factories turn on. The Bureau of Economic Analysis advanced estimate for the first quarter of 2026 was indeed 2% annualized. The fourth quarter of 2025 came in around 0.5%. These are the official numbers. They are not disputed. They are not fake. They exist in the same public record as the rally speeches and the morning show appearances. The gap between 0.5 and 2% actual and 4 to 6% projected is not a minor analytical disagreement. It is a tripling of the official data using forward projections that no mainstream forecasting institution currently supports. And the framing Hassett used to explain any future underperformance was notable in its construction. If the numbers disappoint, blue states will be to blame. California and New York's misguided policies will be the reason the miracle did not materialize on schedule. This is a pre-built accountability shield, not an economic analysis. When outcomes exceed expectations, the credit flows to Trump policy. When they fall short, the fault flows to Democratic governance. The framework is arranged so that no outcome can ever reflect unfavorably on the administration's choices. Citizens who understand how that framing works recognize it for what it is. Those who do not are being set up to accept an explanation that was constructed in advance regardless of what the data eventually shows. The connection between the Iran situation and the economic picture is not indirect. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical energy choke points in the global system. AP has reported repeatedly that tensions in the Gulf are already affecting shipping and generating serious concern about wider supply disruption. When the administration is simultaneously managing a live conflict over that choke point and telling Americans to expect 6% GDP growth, the two claims exist in tension with each other that no press release resolves. Energy disruption in the Gulf does not produce historic growth. It produces exactly the kind of inflationary pressure and market volatility that every mainstream forecast already cites as a primary downside risk. The vaccine remarks deserve direct and careful treatment because this is not a domain where editorial opinion determines the facts. The facts are documented by medical institutions that have no partisan stake in the outcome. Trump described babies receiving massive vats of vaccine pumped into their bodies and suggested that reducing visits to 4 doctor appointments and giving much smaller shots would produce a much better result with autism. He framed this as personal opinion, separate from the policies of the Kennedy Health Operation, but consistent with a view he has held and expressed publicly for years. Fact-checked or documented in December that Trump's claims about American children receiving far more vaccines than children anywhere else in the world were misleading. PBS reporting earlier in 2026 confirmed that the administration had taken the unusual step of reducing the number of universally recommended childhood vaccines, drawing immediate and strong criticism from medical experts who warned that less clear guidance will reduce vaccine uptake and measurably increase disease risk among children, who would then go unprotected against preventable illnesses. The autism claim embedded in Trump's remarks is not a policy opinion. The scientific consensus on the absence of a causal link between vaccines and autism is as established as any finding in modern medicine. When the President of the United States describes vaccines in language that reinforces exactly the kind of parental hesitancy that produces measles outbreaks and whooping cough clusters. The consequence is not political. It is medical. Children get sick. Some of them die from diseases their parents could have prevented. That is the documented cost of the specific category of misinformation, and it does not become less costly because the person spreading it holds elected office. The Trump financial picture rounds out the day's documented record in ways the administration would clearly prefer to discuss as little as possible. Trump Media, the parent company of Truth Social, reported first quarter 2026 revenues of $871,000 against a net loss of $45 million. The stock is currently trading at approximately $8.93 per share, below the $10 SPAC baseline, and dramatically below the $100 plus range at which it traded when the public listing was first announced. The company's official press release described a strong balance sheet and positive operating cash flow. The characterization of a company losing $45 million on revenues under $1 million as having a strong balance sheet requires a definition of strength that most investors would not recognize. The announced merger with TA Technologies, a nuclear fusion energy company with significant Department of Energy dealings, adds a dimension worth examining carefully. A social media company pivoting to fusion energy while holding a crypto portfolio that has declined from a cost basis of $1.131 billion to a current value of approximately $766 million, all while burning cash at a rate that vastly exceeds its operating revenue, is not a standard corporate evolution. It is the pattern of a business searching for a new narrative to offer investors when the current one has stopped generating enthusiasm. The historical pattern of Trump-branded businesses is relevant context, and it is relevant context that Trump's own financial filings acknowledge explicitly. The official filings list Trump Taj Mahal's Chapter 11 in 1991, Trump Plaza, Trump Castle, and the Plaza Hotel filing in 1992, THCR in 2004, Trump Entertainment, Resorts Again in 2009, Trump Shuttle, Trump University, Trump Vodka, Trump Mortgage, Trump Steaks, GoTrump.com. The filings note that past failures do not predict future ones for Trump Media. The fact that the filing felt compelled to say this reflects the relevance of the track record to anyone evaluating the current enterprise. The T1 phone announced by Eric Trump and Don Jr. for August 2025 launch has not shipped as of May 2026. The pre-order terms and conditions updated as of April 6, 2026, are explicit about what customers purchase with their deposits. A pre-order deposit provides only a conditional opportunity, if Trump Mobile later elects, in its sole discretion, to offer the device for sale. A deposit does not constitute acceptance of an offer, does not create a contract for sale, does not allocate or reserve specific inventory, does not guarantee that a device will be produced or made available. Trump Mobile will not be responsible for failure to release a device due to causes beyond its reasonable control, including component shortages, regulatory review, or carrier certification delays. In plain language, the company collected deposits, guaranteed nothing, and reserved the right not to build the product at all. The legal terms are structured to protect the company from any obligation while leaving customers with no recourse. How many millions of dollars in deposits were collected under those terms is not publicly known. The Gold Card program deserves equal attention. Howard Lutnick testified under oath before Congress that one gold card had been effectuated. 1. The program that was supposed to generate trillions of dollars from 50,000 eager applicants willing to pay $5 million each for a path to citizenship has produced one completed transaction. 165 people have paid the $15,000 processing fee, according to the Department of Homeland Security. In court proceedings brought by plaintiffs challenging the program, the Trump administration was forced to concede that the gold card provides no procedural advantage over existing EB-1 and EB-2 visa pathways. The entire legal justification for the program's existence rested on the argument that it does not actually replace or supersede the established visa programs that Congress created by law. In other words, the administration's legal defense of the gold card is that it is a less advantageous version of what already existed. That is not a product. That is a brand extension with no underlying content. The Fort Knox sequence from the Weekend interview is worth examining not because a public assets audit is inherently absurd, but because of what it reveals about the coherence of presidential attention during an active international crisis. When asked about the Fort Knox audit he and Elon Musk had discussed, Trump responded by asking which one the interviewer meant, then acknowledged he wanted to visit and see if the gold was still there, because people steal a lot. He expressed uncertainty about whether an audit was still planned while simultaneously expressing confidence the gold would be there. This is not a tightly reasoned policy position. This is a president drifting between spectacle subjects while managing a live military and diplomatic situation with Iran, a volatile energy choke point, a struggling flagship media company, and an economic forecast that his own advisors are presenting in terms that contradict the official data. The Fort Knox speculation did not create a crisis on its own, but as one item in a single day's collection of presidential communications, it contributes to a picture of a White House where the command attention is scattered across performance priorities rather than concentrated on the governing challenges that demand it. The salary donation question from the same interview produced an answer worth noting. Trump said much of his donated presidential salary goes to White House preservation. He specifically mentioned a new black granite path outside that he described as beautiful and said he paid for it himself out of personal charity. The contractor for the White House reflecting pool renovation received a no-bid contract and has connections to Trump's golf club operations. The salary donation that is supposed to represent personal sacrifice from a billionaire president is being directed, at least in part, toward projects that benefit properties and aesthetics connected to his own brand. The late-night response to this particular Sunday's news cycle did not require invention. The material arrived fully formed. Jimmy Kimmel's recent segment titles have tracked Iran war damage control, Kash Patel in panic mode, threats of intense bombing, Trump saying strange things to children in the Oval Office, an insane social media posting spree, and documented lies about the war's outcome. Those titles are not comedy premises manufactured for entertainment. They are descriptions of documented events that became comedy premises because the events themselves had already done the work. Seth Meyers has covered Trump violating his own Iran deadline, declaring a mini-war over while active fighting continued, promoting his own cognitive test results while forgetting his own presidential terms during public appearances, discussing nuclear war with children present, watching the Strait of Hormuz operation suspended under Iranian pressure, and returning to the claim that his memory is perfect while demonstrating its limitations in real time. The closer look format builds its power from accumulation. No individual item is necessarily disqualifying, but the pattern that emerges from placing them in sequence is harder to dismiss than any single moment in isolation. Colbert's recent work is focused on Iran telling Trump he is losing, the use of executive power as a vehicle for political revenge, and a direct conversation about American credibility and global standing being diminished by the current style of governance. The Daily Show has been covering the administration's failure to meet its own declared Iran deadline, Congress's ongoing reluctance to exercise its constitutional oversight role, Trump's push to have taxpayers fund his personal White House ballroom renovation, and what multiple segments have described as an inability to maintain focus on anything outside the spectacle that surrounds the presidency itself. Comedy lands hardest when it identifies something the audience already senses and names it precisely. The reason these segments are working across 4 different programs, in front of audiences that did not need to be persuaded to find the material credible, is that the underlying facts are already in the public domain. The comedians are not inventing the story. They are performing the story that the documented record is already telling. Here's the democratic accountability frame that ties all of this together, because it matters beyond the individual items. A democracy functions when citizens can evaluate the claims their leaders make by comparing them to independently verifiable evidence. When official communications consistently diverge from official data, the civic cost is not primarily political. It is structural. Citizens who cannot trust the relationship between what is claimed and what is true cannot make informed decisions about the people governing them. That is not a partisan argument. It is a description of what democratic accountability requires to function. On this single Sunday, the administration claimed Iran was effectively defeated while diplomats negotiated quietly in Miami. It projected 6% GDP growth, while official data showed 2%. It described vaccines in language that contradicts established medical consensus. It directed presidential charity toward properties connected to president's own brand. It promoted a phone that is not shipped under terms that guarantee nothing. It defended a visa program in court by arguing it provides no actual benefit over what already existed. Each of these items can be disputed, contextualized, or explained by partisans on either side. But the verifiable record is the verifiable record. The AP reports what it reports. The BEA publishes what it publishes. The court filings say what they say. The pre-order terms and conditions are publicly available for anyone who wants to read them. The gap between the performance and the record is not something that better messaging can close. It is something that only the record itself can close, and the record is not cooperating. That is the story of this particular Mother's Day, and it is a story that will keep generating more material until performance and the reality begin to resemble each other again.